get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
And hey there, Kneecaps Nation. You are locked and loaded for another all-new edition of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by my longtime partner in crime, Phil Byrne. And Phil, we're a day late, but never a buck short because of the MLK Day holiday. And in hindsight, it's probably a good thing we waited an extra day because we waited to see how that Rams and Bears game played out. There was some action on the coaching carousel on MLK Day, and the Lions added another big name to their coaching staff. So a lot to get into on this episode just because we waited 24 hours to do this thing.
Isn't it funny sometimes how that always works out, where I think we were both kind of feeling like, let's see what happens with this, Rams Bears game, maybe let it digest, get some talking points from it, see how other people are going to respond, and then we'll come in basically a day later, and yeah, lo and behold, a bevy of coaching carousel moves, a bunch of injuries impacting the championship games.
Yeah.
Then late this afternoon, the Lions hired an offensive coordinator, and it felt like it was a little bit out of left field.
So this is a Detroit Lions podcast, of course, so we will lead off with the offensive coordinator news. The Lions do step outside the organization. No ties to the Detroit Lions, no ties to Dan Campbell, which I think most of us had kind of hoped they would do, just in the sheer sense of, hey, what they didn't work from a uber familiarity standpoint, the comfort level standpoint. Let's do something different this time. And the Lions did just that by bringing in offensive coordinator formerly of the Arizona Cardinals, Drew Petzing. Now, as you know, Phil, and this goes way back to our days up in the mid-Michigan mountain back in the early 2010s, late 2000s, if you will, I was always that type where 9 times out of 10, I could rattle off offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, boom, 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 rapid fire from every team. Yeah. And inevitably, there's always that one team that you get to and you kind of struggle a little bit. You got to think, ooh, I gotta really think about this one here. The offensive coordinator position of the Arizona Cardinals under former head coach Jonathan Gannon would have been one of those where I would have struggled to think, who in the blue heck is calling plays down there in the desert? And I probably would have had to say, you know what, I give up. Who is it? And that's who the Lions went out and picked up to serve as their new offensive coordinator on MLK Day. So a little bit of context before we get too far down the road with his actual coaching credentials. As we said, no ties to the Lions organization, no former connections with Dan Campbell or Brad Holmes for that matter. So from that level, he is an outsider. However, he does have strong connections to Ben Johnson. They coached together at Boston College a while ago before they both took a leap into the NFL at the same time. And the two became such close friends that Drew Petzing actually stood up for Ben Johnson in his wedding. So you got to think from an ideological standpoint, the two of them think alike. They both like a lot of run game stuff. They like a lot of play action stuff. They like a lot of 2 tight end stuff. So there is a little bit of familiarity with the ethos of the Ben Johnson thing that worked really well for this offense. But for me, that's kind of where the interest sort of levels off for me. I want to know what you think about this hire, Phil. Take it away.
So this is almost kind of par for the course at this point, where whether it's Brad Holmes around trade deadline time or the draft or this, that, or the other thing, I think we set our expectations are, and we come up with a list of names. Certainly we had reporters come up with a list of names who were either interviewing or rumored to be candidates. And then it seemed like basically, I would say the vast majority of Lions fans, because of the name recognition, because of the Shanahan pedigree, utilizing some of the weapons that Miami has had, thought McDaniel would be the perfect Mike McDaniel would be the perfect offensive coordinator. Okay, well, we had a number of other head coaching positions kind of open up here in the last 72 hours. Maybe McDaniel decided to go towards a head coaching role. He was not who the Lions ultimately hired. Now, as far as I know, as we're recording this, he has not accepted a position. It sounds like he might want to go ahead and try to be an offensive coordinator if he doesn't get, a head coaching gig here. But it seemed like there were a bunch of other candidates that maybe had higher degrees of resume, name recognition, this, that, or the other thing. For instance, Sean McDermott of Buffalo gets fired over the weekend. That frees up a very popular name in Joe Brady, who's even been tabbed around the league. And instead of getting any flyers out, they went ahead and they hired Petzing from Arizona off of fired staff. But the thing that was a little surprising to me with all of this is, again, you talk about really no connection outside of Ben Johnson. And then I don't ever remember seeing his name coming into Allen Park. So whatever happened, something through channels of agent or uh, something Zoom related, where he didn't, as far as I know, come into Allen Park to interview or anything like that. So um, completely out of left field and really, really surprising to me. Um, I will say this. I don't think his resume is fantastic or phenomenal. I do think, though, if you looked at what the Cardinals, with all the injuries and everything they had, I think him from a creative standpoint, second half of last season, the Cardinals, while they were a terrible team, I think we're at least competitive in most of these games from an offensive standpoint. Kind of those Stafford teams of old with the Lions here. So not really in favor of this one, to be honest. I think there are a lot more cons, but I also think like this is kind of unfortunately where we as Lions fans set ourselves up, where we've got names, we've got name recognition, and then it always swerves off and goes off somewhere else. A lot of people don't want to remember this or don't remember this, but um, you know, Dan Campbell was not exactly, the household candidate that a lot of people thought was going to get this head coaching job with some that were out there. Variety of other head coaching candidates that got other jobs have since been fired. So, you know, it's one of those things where, to me, I think this still comes down to how Brad Holmes builds this team, and if he can kind of get the play calling back, I think that's a good step in the right direction. But yeah, this one completely took me by surprise this afternoon.
So, what kind of concerns me a little bit, and I'm going to push back on a point that you made just a minute ago about how the Cardinals were pretty competitive offensively in a lot of their games this year. I'd argue that they weren't. They didn't hit 30 points once this year. You'd think that, once in a 17 game regular season, you'd run into a 30-point effort at least once. And I think their season high was like 26 points.
Right.
So if you look at it just from a broad view, let's take a look at the last 3 seasons under Jonathan Gannon. The Cardinals were basically bouncing back and forth on either side of middle of the pack. They were 24th the first year. They jumped up to 12th the second year in 24, and this past year they were 23rd, and then they were 19th, 11th, and 19th again in yards. So nowhere in that time frame, that 3 years, did they ever jump off the page from a total yardage standpoint. There were years where they were a little bit better at running the ball based on the health of their running backs. They did not have the health at running back this past year. So they had some good things going on the running game in 23 and 24, but their passing game was severely limited. Now you bring in Marvin Harrison Jr., thinking maybe you can jumpstart the passing game a little bit. And then the passing game really didn't get going a season ago.
Right.
The passing game got going this year, but that's only because the run game ranked 31st and they were playing from behind. And there was a lot of that, kind of like you mentioned, a lot of that Stat Padford like thing where you're just gunning the ball all over the yard, just trying to catch up in a lot of these games that you're trailing in. So just from a raw numbers standpoint, nothing's really jumping off the page as far as what did the Cardinals do. I also look at the development of Kyler Murray. And do I look at Kyler Murray today when you're getting this on January 20th, 2026? And can I stand before you today and tell you that Kyler Murray is a better quarterback, both in terms of production and mechanics, than he was 3 years ago? I'm not so sure that I can say that. You have to remember, Jonathan Gannon, the head coach, is a defensive guy. So the guy who's going to have the most amount of influence on Kyler Murray and his development is going to be Drew Petzing. And I'm just not sure I see him as a better quarterback. I think Cliff Kingsbury probably got the best out of him that we're going to be able to see. And I don't think that Petzing did a good enough job of unlocking another level to Kyler Murray's game. Now, Jared Goff is on a slightly different career trajectory. He's a little bit further advanced in the development phase, obviously, than Kyler Murray is. So you're not necessarily looking for the same level of development per se, but you still want the next guy that comes in to be able to unlock something that we haven't seen in a positive manner out of your quarterback. And I just don't think you saw that. In contrast, so he also has stops under Kevin Stefanski as the Cleveland Browns quarterbacks coach and the Vikings quarterbacks coach back when Stefanski was with both of those ball clubs. Did you see outstanding quarterback play in both of those situations? I don't know that you did either. So the question for me becomes, is this going to be the right guy to get Jared Goff one last surge of, hey, Jared, take your game to a level we haven't seen yet? Is this the guy that's going to be able to do it? I can't speak to that because I just don't see the data in front of me that shows he has a track record of doing this.
No, that's definitely a valid criticism point. I don't think the Cardinals had a lot of talent on that team from top to bottom. I think they are a bottom 5, if not a bottom 3 roster in the NFL. Kyler Murray being hurt for just about the majority of the season. I think he only played in about 4 games. So he was relying upon Jacoby Brissett, who realistically has more of a skill set than Goff, than Murray. I'm willing to give him some time, but at the same point, I don't think this is the hire that is a quarterback-centric offensive coordinator. I think this is one that is going to try to get the best out of the tight ends, right? With having multiple tight end looks. I could see, Jahmyr Gibbs continue to having strong production under him. I think they are going to run the ball. To me, this looks to be, even though he did not have a Dan Campbell connection, instead of getting someone that could maybe take talent to a next level, I think they're trying to keep it into what they feel comfortable with from a schematic standpoint. I think Dan Campbell is very, very deliberate in terms of how he wants his offense ran. And if he's not going to call plays, I think he wants someone that is going to be lock and step with that. And I think that's going to be with this hire.
And I'm fully okay with that. And I think that the best version of this Detroit Lions team is running that same type of offense, having Jared Goff not necessarily be the guy to make all the plays, have the offense go through the run and get into play action and tight end action and all this. I think that's the best version of the Lions offense. In addition to that, I think the Lions offense and the team as a whole, for that matter, is at their best when Dan Campbell is not calling the plays and he can just be the head coach. So I think in that sense, you're crossing off a couple of critical boxes. Where I take exception is I don't want to have to give a guy time. I don't want to have to wait and see. This team, in my mind, is on the back nine, the far back nine, depending on how you may perceive it, of their current window. And you don't necessarily get every type of opportunity in the world to hire a new offensive coordinator. They brought in Anthony Lynn. That didn't work, barely lasted a year. And then Campbell started calling plays. You promote from within with Ben Johnson. We all know what happens after that. He takes a head coaching job. You bring in John Morton, a guy you're familiar with. He barely lasts a whole season. Campbell calls plays. Now you hire Drew Petzing. So this is your third hire of an offensive coordinator. If this doesn't work out, Phil, this really almost kind of is a dark mark on Dan Campbell. There has to be some level of accountability at some point, and it's almost like, hey, you're almost on the clock here, buddy, as a head coach, bringing in your third offensive coordinator, and it's not a guy that a whole lot of people are excited about. And I'll admit it, Phil, I think that the Lions in the current position they were in, I just wanted a name. I want a guy who has a proven track record at being a good play caller, bringing out a good offense. I think Arthur Smith is a guy who we saw from his time before he was even the head coach when he was at Tennessee, back when they were humming along, getting some one seeds in a row back with the Titans. You had Derrick Henry in a good run game with them that was really setting up a good kind of career revival at the very end for Ryan Tannehill, you might remember. And then he had the ingredients with the Falcons. I think therein lies the issue with the whole calling plays and running the team thing. It just didn't work out in Atlanta, but I thought Arthur Smith would have been a guy that I would have thought you maybe give a good hard look to. Speaking of the Falcons, Zach Robinson, a guy you mentioned off that Shanahan coaching tree, did a better job with the offense this past year. There was other issues at float there, but again, you're talking a lot of good running principles that he has in his repertoire. I would have thought that you give him a look. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, Phil. The fact that nobody saw this on their radar, that in the whole, Rolodex of candidates and all this, I don't think Drew Petzing was on anybody's radar. And just, I think I just wanted something a little bit more of a sure thing as opposed to, hey, let's wait and see, let's let it play out. And I think this is kind of like the put up or shut up year for this whole regime, that if it doesn't work, I think at some point it's going to have to start costing some important people with their jobs.
Well, and so I think the I guess frustrating thing for us as Lions fans is I don't think it is super far into the coaching candidate carousel with where this is going with some of the jobs that have opened up. You mentioned all those names that you just did. Your Joe Brady's, your Zach Robinsons, your Arthur Smiths, your Mike McDaniel, as of we're recording this. As far as we know, unless something has broken in the last 5 minutes since we've been recording this episode, none of them have a role yet. So a lot of them were in positions where, the head coach got fired or let go and things like that. I think that's the frustrating thing is just like, again, like we kind of build ourselves up thinking that we were going to get one of these guys, and who knows, maybe he can and will work out. Hopefully for us Lions fans, we got to hope it will, but it is definitely left field. I think I haven't had a chance to really like dive into, and again, we're working a 9 to 5 and doing a podcast after. I know the Cardinals were not a good team. They were not like an exciting watch or anything. The one thing that I will say though is Trey McBride under his watch, I think has really taken his game to a next level. So obviously Laporta coming off that injury, we know how that's going to go. We know what the Bears and Ben Johnson and Colston Loveland have had kind of cooking here in the last second half of the season, where he looks like he's going to be almost on an all-pro trajectory now with Caleb Williams down there. But the tight end plays a very pivotal role. And to me, I think it was the Ben Johnson aspect. And then I think he wanted to get an offensive coordinator that was going to utilize a tight end in how Dan Campbell wanted a tight end to be used. And I think that's the other thing that he gets with this hire.
So there you have it. Lions have a new offensive coordinator, and I don't think it's anything that is going to instill oodles of confidence in Lions fans. And I think they're going to need to be won over, and they're going to need to be won over quickly.
Yep.
And again, I think this is kind of it for Campbell. I don't think you get to hire a fourth offensive coordinator in a single tenure. It just doesn't work that way, especially if two of them you had to fire as opposed to losing them to head coaching jobs. Just, I mean, if you lose them head coaching jobs, so be it. You know, the Philadelphia Eagles have been going through coordinators like
Yeah.
crazy, but when the majority
5
of
in the
them are
last 5
going,
years.
yeah, when
Yeah.
majority of them are going on to take head coaching gigs, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. When they're just not good enough for the job, then we have issues on our hands. But we'll talk more about this as we progress through the off season. I do want to get into some of the playoff games from over the weekend, and by and large, Phil, it was a pretty entertaining weekend of football. I've always said the divisional round is kind of the most underrated football weekend of the entire year. It's
Yeah.
you're getting the best teams, you're the teams that kind of backed into it that really didn't have any business being there. Looking at you,
Yeah.
Carolina Panthers are out of the mix. You're just looking at really the teams that are the most deserving of being in the playoffs at that point. And we were treated to, by and large, for pretty entertaining games. The one that has the highest amount of sex appeal to Lions fans is going to be the Rams and Bears game. That was the fourth game of the weekend on Sunday. Not quite Sunday night football, but Sunday evening football, a little earlier start time on the NBC broadcast. And that game was really as advertised. It was a back and forth affair, and it wound up going all the way to overtime. And
Yeah.
both teams had their opportunities, and it was ultimately the Rams that walked it off with a game winning field goal and sent the Bears. I hate to use the word Cinderella because I had a feeling they were going to be a big problem this year, but some would say they overachieved this year. So it sent the Bears off into vacation mode. I want to know where your head was at, though, Phil. You and I talked about this a little bit on our last episode, but as
Yeah.
we got to kickoff, were you team Rams or were you team Bears when this one went toe to leather?
Vince, I can't ever root for a team inside the NFC North in the division. So,
Even with
uh,
Stafford on the other side?
even with Stafford on the other
Even with
side,
Mrs.
for
Stafford tweeting
me,
every 5 seconds?
well, I'm not following her on X or whatever
Makes two of
social
us.
media channel, you know. Um, no, so my thing is like I think enough time has passed. It's been over 5 years since this trade. I think the Rams have easily won the trade with where the team is and how they were able to quickly rebuild.
100%.
I think it helps reshape the Lions organization in a positive direction coming out of the Quinn Trisha era. But you know, it's left a lot to be desired here with obviously with where we're at here. To me, had no issue rooting for the Rams in this one. Um, again, it's I don't hate Ben Johnson. You know, I'm not favorable to him though with how everything went down. It still is very, very bitter to me of being in that stadium last playoff round in the divisional round, Lions and Commanders, and you know what on the Monday or Tuesday before the game, of course we had Aaron Glenn, and we had Ben Johnson, interviewing for jobs that they would eventually get. It felt like it was like one foot out the door. The prep wasn't there. The team played miserably. We know how that went. So that's still a bitter taste in my mouth. We've beaten the Rams enough, kind of over the last several years, even though they got our number this year. That, yeah, I'm at peace with that team.
It's a situation for me where you're absolutely right. There was no scenario where I was rooting for the
No,
Chicago Bears.
no,
I don't want them to do well. I can't
bear
stand their
down.
fans. I can't stand the
Shout
Bear
out
Down
Steve Bishop.
song. Oh yes, most definitely. Um, can't stand the Bear Down song. Can't stand the Bears fans' antics. I can't stand the fact that they still talk about something that happened over 40 years ago and puff out their chests and continue to talk about it to this day. I don't want to see Ben Johnson do well immediately, just like Stafford did well immediately when he left here. There was no scenario I was pulling for them. But one observation that I have, Phil, is that the longer we go from the Stafford trade, the farther removed we are from it. It sure as heck seems to me. Again, I'm just a random idiot podcast 9 to 5 kind of guy. I'm no Adam Schefter or even like a big time, former head coach turned talking head or something like that. I'm just a dad in the state of Michigan here. It sure seems to me like Stafford has had probably more of a transition is kind of the more word I'm looking for into
So
just a better overall teammate, better overall leader, better overall football player in his advanced years than he did over his time with Detroit. And it's not like he was only here for a rookie contract and then ran off and did something else. He had a long time here in Detroit to evolve into a better player, a better teammate, a better leader, a better overall guy. He didn't. And he goes into the Rams. You even hear him talking in the post-game interview with Melissa Stark and some of his teammates after the game over the weekend. And I think the amount of ums I heard were like record low. He just seems like he's talking with the swagger of like what Josh Allen would do or what a lot of these other top tier quarterbacks in the NFL would do instead of the timid whatever like you got with the Lions. I understand the winning and losing has a lot to do with it. So when you look at it through the context of all he did in Detroit was lose, all he did with the Rams is win, that's going to change your mindset a little bit. But it just kind of bugs me that the Lions had that for so many years,
well,
and either the Lions couldn't unlock what was obviously in there, or Stafford couldn't find it within himself in some critical moments where he could have done some good things with Detroit had he kind of had the evolution into what he is now. That's just something that I kind of observed watching him a little closer over this last handful of games here.
yeah, no, and to me, I've likened a lot of his situation kind of on the same page as what happened in baseball with the Tigers and Justin Verlander, where you had this, um, incredibly popular player, on the team, or well, I don't know if Stafford was always the most popular, but really the generational talent, that the team had been lacking for so long, um, and finally find success elsewhere when leaving. Um, to me, it's like we know all the success that he had with Calvin, when he was here, and of course we did get to the playoffs a couple times with him. Um, but I think he is 100% going to be more remembered for his time as a Ram
Of
than
course.
anything he did as a Lion here. And it kind of hurts too in the idea of Verlander because I think he's going to be remembered more for what he did outside of Detroit as well. But when you've got organizations outside the city that just run things a little bit better, they've got better people in the front office. They're a little bit more adept at building on surrounding these players. Yeah, it's no doubt that Stafford feels a lot more confident out there.
So we talked a little bit about the Rams and Bears game. That was the one that had the most level of implications to Lions fans. Another one I want to touch on is the Bills and Broncos game, which
Yeah.
was the first game of the weekend. And that one, same thing, kind of went back and forth. And that one also went to overtime, just as the Rams and Bears game did. And a little bit of controversy at the end of that one with regards to officiating. But on the same level, you also had Josh Allen totally lose his mind and turn the ball over 4 or 5 times. Wound up costing Sean McDermott his job after 9 seasons, fired as the Bills head coach on Monday morning, somewhat of an unexpected decision by Bills ownership. So, what I want to know from you, Phil, is you watched those games. Your thoughts on the officiating. A lot of people are contending that that game was kind of wrestled from the waiting hands of the Bills due to some suspect officiating calls. Your thoughts on the way that game ended from a Bills standpoint?
So I know each crew is going to call things a little bit differently, but in these playoff games, with everything on the line, it just seems like sometimes, you know, everyone's watching this game. Whatever is on this network after this game can wait. Can we not just go ahead and just take an additional 60 seconds to make sure that everyone is on the same page with the call and that it's going to make sense and that you're watching the replay and you're seeing it and it is truly what is happening? Um, I don't think they spent enough time reviewing the interception late. I think it was a hastily made call that cost Buffalo the game. Josh Allen and everything that went down, a whole nother story. I think a lot of it just goes into him having to be like what we saw with Mahomes a lot of times, maybe not so much this year, but in previous years, where you don't have that top level receiver, you're forcing things, and basically the Bills' best play eventually got into just having Josh Allen scramble. Um, so again, just the fact that that game turned on a dime like that. The crazy thing about all this too, the Broncos win. The second to last play of the game, Bo Nix, he injures his ankle,
Yeah.
and now he's hurt. So
Yeah.
very, very
So now you
bizarre
get Jarrett
situation.
Stidham coming in to essentially he gets the call up to the big leagues
Yeah,
in the biggest game the Broncos have played in the last decade. The
yeah.
guy who we haven't seen do anything in the NFL at all since he was drafted, and he's the guy. So because of that, the Patriots go into this one as 5.5 point favorites in the Mile High City. You think a guy like Jarrett Stidham coming off a ice cold bench to play in the biggest game of his life with only a week to prepare, is there any scenario that the Broncos were able to come out and pull off a big win and Jarrett Stidham just drives a bus to greatness? Or is this just something you see in movies only?
Hey, who was that quarterback of the Vikings that beat us? I can't remember his name.
Brosmer.
There we go.
Yeah, on Christmas Day.
I would rather have Jarrett Stidham than Brosmer. I've heard of Jarrett Stidham before.
Yeah,
I think he was decent in college.
Auburn.
Yeah, and
Back in the Gus Malzahn era.
yeah, who could forget that era?
Yeah.
The issue here is more or less like the Patriots are as hot as they've been. You got Drake May, who, if Stafford's not the MVP, it's going to be Drake May.
Yeah.
The Broncos have a phenomenal defense. They don't have a ton of weapons on offense. I truly think the only hope that the Broncos have in this game is going to be like if it's like 6-3,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just literally a field goal kind of game. They're playing in the elements out in the Mile High, but I know we're not making a pick right now. But um, crazy scenario with that team. I mean, that's literally like who was Goff's backup? The Allen,
Kyle Allen.
Kyle Allen. Yeah, if we were in their shoes and it was Kyle Allen that was, you know, lacing up at Ford Field as our starting quarterback to go to the Super Bowl, like,
I wouldn't feel good about that.
no, no, So, anyways,
Let's make the pick then. So in the AFC Championship game, 3 o'clock on CBS, Jim Nantz and Tony Romo for all the good and not so good that goes along with that. Patriots, as we said, are road favorites, laying 5.5 points as they travel to the Mile High City. So, of course, the line, heavy shift after the Bo Nix injury. Jarrett Stidham, as we said, in at quarterback for Denver. Sean Payton says he has all the faith in the world that Stidham can come in and win the game. I'm sure a lot of that's coach speak, though. Your pick on this one, Phil.
yeah, this is easy. This is Patriots. I think that 5.5. I think they can win at least by 10 points.
I'm with you there, Phil. The Patriots are going to win this game by more than 5.5 points.
Yeah.
And what a cool story. And again, we're not doing a Patriots podcast, and I don't even consider myself to be a Patriots slap or anything, but what a cool full circle moment for Mike Vrabel, to do it all those times as a player, come back in his first year and do it as a head coach with a young quarterback. There's really not a whole lot of anything left over from the Brady and Belichick era at this point. It's basically just a whole new time to be a Patriot fan. And they're 60 minutes away from the Super Bowl, and I think they were kind of more or less handed a free square because of the untimely Bo Nix injury. It's just amazing how your season can change on you in a blink of an eye. Next game up on the championship Sunday slate is the NFC Championship game for the George Halas Trophy, 6:30 p.m. on Fox. Kevin Burkhardt and Tom Brady on the call for that one. The Seahawks, home favorites, they're laying 2.5 as they host the LA Rams. Both teams have beat the other once on the season. It was a chance for Seattle to walk it off with a field goal at the Rams middle of the season. That would have been a season-long field goal for the Seahawks kicker. He missed it, so the Rams held on for that one. And in the return trip later in the season up in the Pacific Northwest, that game went to overtime. The Rams got the ball first, scored. Seattle got the ball second, scored, decided to go for two, and wound up winning the game that way, ending it. And that put the Seahawks in the driver's seat to get that number 1 overall seed.
Yeah.
It's always tough to beat a team in the playoffs in the division that you've already faced twice. So both teams are going to be up against it in this one. How do you see this one shaking out?
Charbonnet for the Seahawks also tore his ACL in the game against San Francisco.
Yep.
That was reported today. So they'll be down to K9, kind of toting the rock.
He stepped up big in the game, though.
He did. The big thing for me, I love that Seahawks defense. I think the Rams also have a good defense. The Rams have 2 running backs. They got 2 receivers. They got 2 tight ends. They got like 2 of everything on that offense. I think they're going to be able to score enough points against the Seahawks. We're still talking about Sam Darnold. And I know in years of yesteryear, you had your Trent Dilfers, your Brad Johnsons, your quarterbacks that just weren't that good getting to the Super Bowl. I think Sam Darnold's a little better than those guys. But I don't think he's good enough to get the Super Bowl. I'm going to go with the Rams.
And for a lot of the same reasons you just said, Phil, I'm picking the Rams because I said way back at the very beginning that the Rams were going to be a big problem, and they had what it took to come out of the NFC, and why would I back down from that now? And 25 years later, it's looking like we're going to have a rematch between the Rams and the Patriots in the Super Bowl based on my predictions. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll see how the coaching carousel spins around over the next few days here in the NFL, Phil.
Well, and what's really strange about, these teams in the Final Four is you go back, 10 years ago, of course, you had your Super Bowl with the Seahawks and the Broncos. You had one with the Seahawks and the Patriots. So it's like there's this little connective tissue between the 4 teams that are in there. Even if we haven't seen all of these teams, other than the Rams here really as of late.
So that's the story for us here on Kneecaps for Breakfast. A lot of fun breaking down the playoffs and getting into it a little bit with the Lions offensive coordinator hire. More to come as far as that and much more as the NFL playoffs and the NFL offseason drags on. Stick around for more Kneecaps for Breakfast. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Krogar saying good morning. Go Lions. Forward on the field. Over and out.